Hello everyone. Today I would like to show you all the steps you need to take to get your TBS Tango II Crossfire radio to talk to your Betaflight flight controller in your drone. So I'm using the TBS Crossfire Nano receiver in my build. So the first thing I did was try to find a place to put this into my drone and then wire it up to my flight controller. So as you can see here in this photo, my Crossfire Nano is in the bottom right, well, in the right side of this picture. And on the left side is my Holybro Kakute F7 HDV flight controller. And you can also see that I'm using this with the DJI Air unit. And I was using this with the DJI radio, and I've switched over to using the Crossfire with the TBS Tango II. And so this is how I changed my configuration and my wiring. Actually, I left the whole DJI setup exactly as it was, and I've wired in this Crossfire Nano receiver to a separate spare UART that I have on my flight controller. And as you can see here on the Nano, I have the power connected, so the negative and the positive. And above that, I have the yellow wire, which is connected to my UART number 4 on the RX side. And the white wire on the top there of the Nano is connected to UART 4's transmit side. And the amazing, awesome, great things about Crossfire is that they're extremely flexible, extremely customizable. But that means there isn't necessarily, it's not as simple to set up either because you've got all these great options. So you can have these wires reversed or set up in all kinds of different ways as long as you have the software telling them exactly what to do. But I'm following a guide. I think this was from Oscar Liang, but a lot of people do it the same way. This is how I have mine set up, and as long as you follow the same instructions, you should be good. If not, you can always flip these two wires around. But you can see here, the yellow wire I have is going to, I'll say it again, a spare UART called TX, or the yellow one is going to the receive UART, or the RX4, and the white one is connected to the TX4 or transmit on the flight controller. So where you exactly wire this up to your flight controller actually depends quite a lot on your flight controller. I happen to have an F7 flight controller, which means it's got a lot of spare UARTs, and that's not hard to find something extra. If you're using a F4 flight controller, and especially an F4 because they usually have an S-bus pad where you would have connected a FrSky receiver, and the FrSky receiver uses an inverted protocol, so you cannot connect your Crossfire to an inverted UART or port like that, like you would connect your FrSky. If you're brand new to this, just ignore the whole anything that has to do with that setup, and just find something that's a spare UART, something on your flight controller or in the flight controller's manual that talks about RX and TX, and wire it up to a spare one that's on your flight controller that's not being used for anything else. In the case of this Holybro Kakute F7, I looked at the manual, and it'll tell you the manual has a certain UART that's built into that plug that's connecting the DJI Air unit, so you don't want to use that. I picked one of these ones that are on the side. I think TX2, 3, 4, 6, all of those were perfectly good options. I just happened to pick TX4. You just have to make note of which one you wired it up to, so when you go into Betaflight, you know which one to change the settings for. Oh, I should also explain more about how I'm powering this. I'm powering this from my flight controller, which has a 5-volt and ground right there next to those UARTs. So the Crossfire Nano receiver is getting 5 volts out of the flight controller. So now that you've got your receiver all wired into your drone, the next thing you want to do is fire up your radio and make sure you've got the very latest firmware installed on it. So I've got a whole other video where I go through all of the steps in getting the latest firmware on your radio, but the really short version of it is that you're going to want to grab a USB-C cable, plug it into the radio, plug it into your computer, make sure you have the TBS Agent X downloaded and installed on your computer, get that up and running, and make sure it detects your radio, and check the firmware versions, tell it to update the radio if it needs it, and then tell it to update the Crossfire that's built into the radio if it needs an update as well. And once you've got those steps, once you have those steps completed, then you can move on to the next phase. The next thing I suggest you do is to bind your receiver to your radio. So let's power up the radio here. And then I'm going to hold down the menu, page over, oh no. I'm going to hit the menu button. Hopefully you can sort of see that a little bit. And I'm going to go into I'm going to click on the Crossfire menu by touching this scroll wheel to say Crossfire menu, Tango II Crossfire. I'm going to scroll down to where it says bind. Now it's in binding mode, green flashy light. Now I need to power up my receiver. And in my case, my flight controller will power up the receiver when I plug in the USB port. That may not be the case for you. You may have to plug in a battery to get that to work. But as you can see here, the Crossfire is flashing red. And if you're on a different version of Crossfire on your receiver than your radio, it's going to ask you to update the micro RX. So I'm going to hit enter. And now it's updating. So as you can see here, it's sending the updates to the receiver. And we're going to have to wait for that to finish. RX is loading. Don't what? Probably don't kill the power. And now it's binding. It's a little unfortunate that the screen on the Tango II is so small it cuts off words, and now it says binding C. Does that mean binding complete? So if I exit back to the Crossfire menu, now I can see that I've got a Crossfire Nano RX listed here. And if I exit back to the main menu, I can see at the top there, I've got some signal bars to let me know that it's talking. So I moved my camera around a little bit to hopefully get a much better picture of the screen on the TBS Tango II, which is quite difficult to get on the camera. But now here you can see the Wi-Fi signal, not Wi-Fi, the Crossfire signal bars right up there. Those little, to show you that I've got a good connection to my Crossfire receiver. And the next thing I want to do is go to the receiver itself and change some settings on it. So I'm going to hit the menu button, and then Crossfire menu will pop up, and I'll hit the enter, which is the scrolly wheel. I'll click that down, and here you can see I've got Tango II Crossfire. That's what's built into the radio. And then I want to go down here to where it says Crossfire Nano RX, enter that, and it'll talk to the Crossfire receiver that's in my drone and get all the settings from it. The first setting I have set is 8. I'm on 8-channel mode instead of 16-channel mode. Unless you need extra buttons and switches, 8-channel mode will give you the best performance. Got telemetry on, so I get information back from the receiver. These, I think, are the defaults. So I've got dynamic. And you definitely want to make sure your failsafe mode is set to cut if you're flying a drone like I am. If you're flying a plane or a wing or something, you may want different settings here. But for drones, multi-rotors, quads, you want cut so that it just falls out of the sky the second the link between the radio and the receiver fails. The other thing you need to make sure you set, which probably is not set by default here, is output 1 and output 2. You want to set output 1 to Crossfire transmit, output 2 to Crossfire receive, and that corresponds to the white and yellow wire that I have on my receiver connected to my UART for transmit and receive. If you've got these swapped around, then you can go in here and you can change the settings so that the transmit and receive are different. But if you were following exactly with the way I have mine set up, this is how you would have your receiver configured so that the correct transmit and receive information is going back and forth between your flight controller. And I'm not using any of these other things. I didn't change anything in the channel maps. Here you can see which firmware version I'm at. And that should take care of getting your Crossfire receiver configured the way you need it to talk to Betaflight on your flight controller. So at this point, your radio should be talking to your receiver should be wired into your flight controller, and everything should be talking, and the signal should be getting through to your flight controller. So now you have to make a couple of changes in Betaflight to make sure Betaflight can talk to Crossfire properly. So what you're going to want to do is fire up Betaflight, go look at your flight controller, and click on your Ports tab. And in my case, I configured UART number 4, as you remember how I wired it. UART 4 is connected to Crossfire. So you have to make sure you have your serial RX flipped on UART 4. That tells Betaflight that that's where your radio is connected. Then down here on the Configuration tab, I have my receiver set to S-bus, or whatever this sort of default is here. But the important thing is I've changed my serial receiver provider to be Crossfire. When I was using the DJI radio or other radios, you'd have this set probably to S-bus. But to use the Crossfire, you want CRSF, which stands for Crossfire. The other thing you're going to want to make sure is enabled here is telemetry output. That makes sure that the data from your flight controller and your everything goes back through the Crossfire and gets to your radio in case you want to use the telemetry data. And then you're going to want to save and reboot and make sure that's all set. All right, flight controller's rebooted, everything's happy. All right, on this receiver tab here, and if I move the sticks on the radio, you can see values are changing. So that means everything is ready to go for the next step. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm happy with the way things are set up and all the hardware is good. I need to create a new model in my radio so that I can change all the settings to be exactly the way I want it to be talking to Betaflight. So I'm going to long press the scrolly wheel to bring up the model selection menu. And I'm going to click the scrolly wheel on this model select, and you won't have all these models here when you're doing this. I've been playing around with creating new models to make sure I can make this video correctly. And I'm going to click on model 104 here. And I want to create a new model. So I'm going to click Create Model. And I am doing a multi-rotor, not a plane or a delta. Enter on that. And here's where you get to assign the channels for things like the throttle. And in my case, I want to use the AETR setup, which is exactly the same as what my DJI radio was using, and sort of what the default you'll get in Betaflight. So to do that, that means I want my throttle to be on channel 3, which is correct. That's what it's got here, channel 3. Oops, I don't want to hit enter. I want to hit the page button to move on to the next page. And now it's on roll, and I want roll to be channel number 1. So I'll click the scrolly wheel and change this down to channel 1. Click the scrolly wheel again to confirm, and hit page to go to the next page. Pitch, I want channel 2, which is correct, so I'll just hit page again. And yaw, I want that yaw to be channel 4, so I need to change that with the scrolly wheel. Down to channel 4, enter, page, and assign aux1. Aux1, for me, I want to be the 3-position switch up on the top of the radio, so I want to change that to SB. You may have different preference for how you want your buttons set up, but that's how I'm going to have mine. And let's see, hit page to move on. Why do I have dust on the screen? And now it's asking me about aux3, and on my case, aux3, I want this to be the other 3-position switch on the right-hand side, so I want to change that to SC. And now it's asking me to the aux2 or beeper button, and I would like that to be the Oh, the button on the left side, so that's SA. And that looks like that's correct. So I'll continue. And these can all be changed later if you change your mind. It's not a big deal. But let's just double check. Throttle is channel 3, and that's correct. Roll is channel 1, and that's what I want roll on. Pitch, channel 2, and yaw is channel 4. And then I've got 3 other buttons that I can play with. So I need to press the scrolly wheel long press to confirm. And now I've got a model 105 all ready to go. So if I go back to the main menu, you can see I'm running model 105, move my throttle, yaw, pitch, everything. I see those move, flip some switches, and things change. Now the next thing I need to do is I actually want to use one more button. So I need to go through the menu and change that other button. So what I'm going to do now to add a 4th button is click the menu button and then hit the page button to switch pages here and flip through until I get to page 5. On page 5 I can see where I've got channel 1, 2, 3, 4 that I just set, and here's where we set the SB, SA, and SC buttons. I want channel 8 to do something, so I'm going to click the scrolly wheel and I'm going to go down and say channel 8, the source for channel 8. What is the button I want that to be? I want that to be D, SD, which is the button on the top right side. Oop, there we go, SD. And hit exit. Now you can see down here I've got SD is being sent as channel 8. So that's perfect. That's just how I want it. Exit back to the main menu. Going back over here into Betaflight and into the receiver section, I can see that if I move my throttle up and down and move my roll, pitch, yaw, all of those things are moving the correct channels. And if I flip my 3 position switch here, I can see that it changes the value for aux1. If I flip the other 3 position here, I see it changes the value for aux3. And if I push my button here, it changes aux2, and push the other button that's labeled D, and I get aux4. So that lets me know that I've got all my channels mapped correctly. They're being sent to the flight controller. And if I were to go into my modes tab, where I already have mine, this was configured specifically for how I wanted my DJI FPV radio to be configured. And I've got these mapped now exactly the same way, so I can just flip between radios whenever I want. And you can see here as I flip my arming switch, the top one changes there. And if I ever want to sort of in an emergency flip between angle and horizon mode, I can do that. And I've got my beeper, so if I set my 3 position switch into the middle, the beeper will go off. I don't know, that's just the way I have mine set. So every time I arm, it goes through the beeper and then into the arming. And down here you can see I've got my D button or aux4 configured to be my flip over, crash, or turtle mode switch. And I also have a pre-arm switch configured. That's the big A button. I have to push that down first before I can arm anything. You can choose to have your switches and buttons all different ways, but at least with this setup, you've got 4 different switches, and all of that information is getting sent to your flight controller, and you can configure it how you wish. Another thing that comes highly recommended is to go through the menu and calibrate your sticks. So I'm going to long press the menu button to bring up this menu, the radio setup menu. I'm going to page over to page number 4, and you can see the calibration comes up here. Click the scrolly wheel to say, yes, I want to calibrate. And the first thing it wants me to do, let's see, probably wants me to center the sticks. And it wants me to, I'm going to calibrate both the left and the right. Like I could change to just calibrate one or the other, but I want to calibrate both. Hold stick at center, enter when done. Middle right. Top right. Top middle. Top left. Middle left. Bottom left. Bottom middle. Bottom right. Now it wants you to move up and down, left and right in a plus shape, but don't go to the extreme in the corners. And when you're satisfied with how much of that you've done, you can hit enter and hit exit to go back. And now your radio should be calibrated. Once you've calibrated your sticks, you should hop over to Betaflight again, go down to the receiver tab, and just double check that the values are what you expect them to be. So when everything's centered like this, I'm just leaving my sticks in the middle, even got the throttle up to middle position, and you can see that they're very steady, solid at 1500, and you should check the range to see that they go somewhere close to between 1000 and 2000 for each of the values. And if they do, then you're all set to move on to the next phase. Another thing you're going to want to do, just sort of to double check that everything is working properly, is to click the menu button, and then we're going to page through almost all the way to the end here, get to the telemetry screen, which is page 11 of 12, and we want to go down and discover new sensors. And you'll see here that it's talking to the Crossfire receiver, and stop discovery. And you can see that these values are changing, meaning it's talking back and forth and getting telemetry from the system. So at this point, you could probably go outside and fly and everything will work great. But before you do that, I would suggest you double check your failsafe. I would take your props off and check that your radio can control the drone and motors and stuff seem to be moving. And then turn off your radio and just make sure that everything dies. It doesn't freak out or anything like that. Then you could go out and fly and everything should be good, but there are a couple other convenient things you might want to do to make your experience a little bit more fun. So one of those things is to get the telemetry data or your signal strength, your link quality, or your RSSI into your OSD. And another one is to have your radio give you some audible alarms if your signal quality is getting low. So what I want to do now is get the link quality to show up in my OSD. But I'm using the DJI FPV system, and at this current time, the DJI OSD from Betaflight cannot show the native link quality. So what I have to do is sort of use the older mode where you put the link quality over a separate channel, and you sort of translate it into RSSI, and RSSI is something that DJI does support in their OSD on their goggles. So to do that, I need to go into the menu, and then I'm going to go into the Crossfire menu and go into the Nano RX. And I'm currently in 8-channel mode, but I want to add another channel to send the RSSI information over, and I'm using all 8 channels. So in this case, just to make things simple, I'm going to switch to 12-channel mode. And then I'm going to exit out of this menu, come back into the menu so that it refreshes in 12-channel mode, and scroll down to see my channel maps here. And I have configured channel 9, which normally would just say channel 9. I've configured it to show link quality. So that means the link quality is being sent from the receiver over channel 9 into Betaflight. We can exit out of this menu, and then we need to hop over to Betaflight. And here in Betaflight, we can see that I have configured over here on the right hand side, I have aux channel 5, which maps to channel 9. So the first 4 channels are roll, pitch, yaw, throttle, and aux 5, and if you keep adding things up, channel aux 5 is actually channel 9, which is what I set in the Crossfire receiver to send the RSSI on. So once you set this here and you save and reboot, the information should be you're sending link quality information over that channel, And then you can go down in your OSD and add the RSSI information wherever you would like it to be. And that brings us to the last thing I want to set up today, and that is setting your radio so that it'll give you some audible warnings when your link quality drops. And that's extra important when you're using the DJI FPV system with its OSD that does not show the native link quality, and you're translating link quality to RSSI, and it's harder to tell. You don't get good information about like which Crossfire mode you're in. So I'm following along with what Oscar Liang's got a great tutorial on this, and I'll make sure I put a link down in the description to his website. So what you want to do is go click the menu button and page over until you get to the section on logical switches, and you want to configure logical switch number 1, and its function is a less than x, and the first value you want to be RFMD, and you want that value to be 2. And back out of this, and you want to set up logical switch number 2, and that's going to be similar, whoops, a less than x, and RQLY, and the value of 80%. Whoa, too fast. And set up logical switch number 3, where a is less than x, and the value, again, RQLY, and this time it's 70%. And then we want to page over to special functions. This is where we want to set it to play the audible warnings when it gets to those special conditions. So this first one here, we want SF1. Oops, did I go past it? Oh, wait, I'm setting up special function number 1 to be L02. There we go, L02. And I want to change this to play a sound. And the sound I'm going to pick is warning 1. And then you want to switch this to be the exclamation 1x, but I can't quite see what's there. So I want it like this, and I'm pretty sure that's the exclamation 1x, which means don't play this sound when you turn on the radio. Okay, and then we want to set up the next one. So this is L03. Configure it to play a sound. And I want this one to be the siren sound. And again, change that to the exclamation point. And it looks like I actually have this one to be not L02, and that should actually be L02. In, I suppose, computer speak or whatever you want to call it, the exclamation point can often mean the opposite or not. So that's why I was reading that as not L02. All right, where is that? Somehow I figured it, I made it beep a whole bunch of times. There we go. Now it's on L02, not the opposite of that. And there you have it. Now I've got my audible alarm set up so that if my link quality starts to drop and it changes modes, my radio will give me some warning sounds. All right, everyone, there you have it. If you've been following along, you should now have your TBS Tango II radio talking to Betaflight and your Crossfire receiver and sending telemetry, and your RSSI value should be showing up in your OSD, or your link quality should be showing up in your OSD over your RSSI value. And if you're running the DJI FPV system like I am, you should be able to get your RSSI link quality value there, and your radio should be sending you audible warnings if you're getting low signal strength. And I think that's it. Definitely let me know if there's anything I've forgotten, and if you've got other questions, be sure to check out TBS's Tango II manual, because they've got a lot of great information in there, and check out Oscar Liang's website on Crossfire related things if you've got other questions about that. And otherwise, thanks for watching, and go out and enjoy flying your TBS Tango II system.